Grace and peace. Welcome to Judah's Roar Domestic Violence Awareness Initiative YouTube channel. I am your host, Apostle Cheryl. Now, before we get started, you know what I'm about to say. I want you to check down here at the bottom below the video and make sure you subscribe if you've not done so already. And then make sure you click that bell for notifications so that you receive a notice every time we upload a new video, which is Sunday afternoons at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. Also, you can share the video as you view the video, and don't forget to like the video. Give us a thumbs up, okay? If you receive a notice from us and you're not able to join us in the live chat, then do feel free to just go ahead and share the link as soon as you get it on all your social media platforms, and then come back and view the video at your earliest convenience. Okay, so we are about to close out the segments that we've been doing this series on depression. Segment 1 addressed sadness, grief, and depression. What is the difference? And then segment 2, we addressed the risk factors, the things that make us vulnerable or predisposed to experiencing depression in our lives, okay? And then in this segment 3, we're going to look at the different types of depression. And it's important that if you are diagnosed with depression, that it's done by a qualified mental health professional so that they are able to identify and narrow in what type of depression you're experiencing. And the reason that this is important is because that will inform the treatment plan that will be most effective for you. Okay, different types of depression respond to different types of treatment. And so it's important to be able to pinpoint and narrow down what it is that you're actually experiencing. Now, we shared before that according to the World Health Organization, there are 264 million plus people worldwide are affected by depression. Over 264 million people have some interaction with this. And so it's important that we have an understanding about it. And one of the things that we wanted you to know is that sadness and grief and depression are not the same thing. We hear those terms used interchangeably, and that's not really accurate, okay? And if we're going to bring a viable solution to any problem, we have to be able to accurately identify what the actual issue and problem is, okay? What the actual challenge is. So there are several different kinds of depression. We're going to talk about some of them. This is not at all an exhaustive list, but we think it's important that we understand the different types. And it's our hope that this information will serve you and will be helpful to you in your own life. Okay. Depression is one of the most common mental health conditions that are out there. And still there is somewhat of a stigma attached to it. And people mistake depression for an individual having a lack of a willpower. They need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and all of that other foolishness that we often hear. And it's really just rooted in ignorance. And so part of our purpose is to educate and to help people to have accurate information so that when we're interacting with one another, we can be kind and empathic and compassionate while holding folks accountable. Okay. So the first type of depression that we're going to talk about is major depressive disorder, which is the one that most people are probably familiar with. This is what most comes to mind when people think of depression. It's the most common depression diagnosis. And this is kind of what it looks like. Loss of pleasure in activities that you enjoyed, or anhedonia, we've spoken about that, along with a depressed mood that lasts at least 2 weeks. Increased irritability in children and teens, but I'm going to tell you increased irritability in grown folk too, okay? Can also be an indicator of major depressive disorder. And so sometimes when you're dealing with somebody and they're just Mr. or Miss Cranky Pants, they're just irritable, rah, all the time. Sometimes there's some underlying depression going on there, okay? And they may not even be aware of it. Another form of depression that we want to talk about is postpartum depression. And postpartum depression can occur in people who have just given birth, but can also begin during pregnancy itself, okay? Um, if there's a history of depression, you may be more likely to experience postpartum depression during pregnancy or not too long after giving birth. Now, this can spiral out of control. You've seen stories, you've heard stories about how new mothers may harm their babies, may even kill their babies, uh, may have a difficult time bonding with their new baby. They don't feel any attachment to it. And so that is definitely a red flag regarding postpartum depression. And if you know someone who is dealing with this or is expressing that they don't feel emotionally connected to their baby or they don't really want to have a whole lot to do with their baby, it's possible that they're experiencing postpartum depression. And it's important that they get help for that. Okay, that's important. Okay, seasonal affective disorder is something that many people experience, and a lot of times it's exacerbated by where they may live in the world, and really what the seasons are, right, and with the changing of the seasons. So it's a subtype of depression that's triggered by seasonal changes. It's more common in the winter, in the fall, but it can occur in the summertime. Now listen, I lived in Alaska, as many of you know, for 2 years, and it's especially pronounced there because the winter is so long. And so you have 5.5 to 6 months, not where it's pitch dark. I mean, the closer you live to the north, the actual North Pole, the longer you have to deal with that darkness and the darker it gets when it does get dark. Okay. But where I lived in the Wasilla, Anchorage area, it would stay broad daylight until just about midnight. And then it would go to dusk for about 3 or 4 hours, and then it would start to be daylight again. So it never got dark. And this can throw your body off, right? And so people who live in those kinds of climates, it's common for them to have sleep disturbances, and it's not uncommon for them to experience depression as well. All right, and so for that, light therapy is helpful, because you're giving your body that light, and they actually have lights that you can purchase. We used to call them happy lights. Everybody had one, to make sure that they got enough light therapy, and so that is helpful for most folks. Um, so persistent sadness during a particular time of year could be indicative of seasonal affective disorder. All right. But again, seek some help from your primary care doctor, from your mental health professional regarding some of the things that you can do. I know when I lived in Alaska, we took vitamin D, we used the happy light for light therapy if we needed to do that to make sure that our mood stayed stable. Then, of course, diet and exercise is always important, and getting the proper amount of rest is also important. Okay, the next kind that we're going to talk about, the next subtype, is persistent depressive disorder. Okay, this used to be called dysthymia or chronic major depression, where it's just kind of ongoing. It's a form of depression that lasts for at least 2 years. So you've been dealing with these symptoms for 2 years, 2 solid years of feeling terrible. Okay. Um, it's challenging to treat, but it is treatable. And again, it's important that you are diagnosed by a competent mental health professional so that you know which subtypes you're dealing with, and then they can develop for you a viable treatment plan. All right, the next form of depression that we're going to talk about is bipolar disorder depression. Okay, some forms of bipolar disorder involve depressive episodes, and sometimes the depressive episodes alternate with episodes of mania or hypomania. Um, like this pendulum swinging back and forth. Okay. Um, the amount of time between the depressive episode and the manic episode or the mania can vary from person to person. And the treatment for it can differ based on what form of depression that you're dealing with. For example, with bipolar depressive disorder, prescribing an antidepressant may not be the best, safest, most effective way to manage that, okay? What are we talking about? We're talking about different types of depressions. Now, there are other depression subtypes. Depression with the subtype of being anxious, depression with catatonia, depression with melancholy, depression with psychosis, depression that is atypical. Um, there's a strong correlation. This is what we really want you to grasp. There's a strong correlation between having mental health conditions and having been a victim of domestic violence. Is a very, very strong correlation. There's also a strong correlation between having mental health conditions and someone becoming a perpetrator of abuse. Domestic violence is detrimental to the victim, of course, and to whoever's connected to them, to whoever cares about them, because they can be vicariously impacted by it, and it can trigger feelings of hopelessness and guilt and worthlessness in those that are connected to the victim, because they feel helpless to do anything to change what the victim is experiencing. Okay. And so in this segment, we've identified several different, certainly not an exhaustive list, of subtypes of depression. We want you to understand as we wrap up this series that being a little sad, experiencing grief is not the same thing as depression. Okay. Depression is serious, it's debilitating. And it can get so bad that a person can't even get out of bed. They can't get out of bed. They don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. They don't see any hope for things getting any better. And one of the definitions that we have come to embrace for hope is believing that life can be better than what it is right now, and that I have the power to make it so, that the power lies within me to make it so. And this is what we want you to know, that there is life after abuse, that there is life after depression when moving through depression. If you are experiencing any thoughts of self-harm, we encourage you to reach out for help, ask for help, okay? You can reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE, the word SAFE, S like in Sam, A-F like in Frank, E. 1-800-799-SAFE or 1-800-799-7233. And then there's the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, Lifeline. And so please, please, please don't sit in your depression and not reach for help. Reach for help. There's help out here. There's help out here. There's life after abuse, and there is life after dealing with depression. There is life, an abundant, full, happy, productive life is available to you. All right. We are pulling for you. We've got confidence in you. And we pray that this video has been a blessing to you. You be safe out there. Blessings to you.